Hello there, and welcome to Frontiers of Innovation, a LinkedIn Live platform and initiative brought to you by Canon. We're absolutely delighted that you've joined us for this live event this evening too, and thank you all. And indeed this evening, early afternoon, people coming in from all around the region, we see that. Wonderful to have you all on board. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Etna Trainer, and I'm going to be your host for this program. Now, many of you, of course, will be familiar with our very successful conference format, Frontiers of Innovation, that Canon has put on for bringing you up to date with engaging speakers, talking about what has been impacting and trending in our world. But now this series, we're going to stay virtual, obviously, for it. And this series will focus on digitalization and how it is impacting all of our lives, indeed. So in the coming weeks, Frontiers of Innovation is actually going to take a look at all of the fast-paced changes that are impacting you and me at home and at work. And sometimes we're in the same place, right? We look at education, we'll look at play, we look at culture, we look at security. We'll really take a broad look and bring you some great speakers who are going to engage and hopefully inspire you in the next few weeks. Now, of course, we want you to be involved. We're going to have a very lively hour here. You're coming in from the region and indeed beyond the region. So what I'd love to see is some more questions coming in. We have great speakers. So do drop a note, ask your question, tell us who you are, tell us where you're coming in from, and we'll make sure to put those questions and we'll engage with our great panel that we have in place today. What we're going to be looking at for the next hour really is how digitalization is impacting everything we do, and particularly how this has indeed speeded up in the last few months with the impact of COVID-19. Let's meet our great panel. We have them here. We have from IBM, we have Eduardo Aspillaga. So Eduardo, of course, is the Digital Transformation Strategy Lead. We're delighted to have him with us. We also have the CEO of TradeLink, Mohammed Shabib. Thank you, Mohammed, for being with us. And also, you know, we look back, we'll have a chat with Mohammed, indeed, of his great experience as a serial tech entrepreneur. There's a lot more than what he's doing right now. And I'm thrilled too that the CEO of Jumia Egypt has joined us too, Hisham Safwat. So a great lineup here, gentlemen. Thank you for being with us. What I'd love to do is kick this off and get started with Eduardo. When we really look, and particularly coming from your IBM background, coming with the big picture, give us a feel for where you see digitalization. Here we are, mid-2020. How important is it? How much is it impacting our lives? And indeed, how has this been accelerated perhaps with the impact of COVID-19? Eduardo.
Thank you, Edna, and thanks for Canon for this invitation to be in this session with these great speakers. So in general terms, what we've seen in the market, in the corporate world, of course, after this not normal situation, is an absolute, I would say, acceleration on digital projects. We see everywhere in the region companies, employees, executives, entrepreneurs running and moving very fast to keep serving their customers and to keep their business alive and kicking. We're really impressed how people has adopted new ways of working, adopted to this new situation, and finding creative ways to collaborate between them and really keep productive. So I would say the first reaction was very, very thoughtful and careful about how things were going to be developed. But as people start realizing that this is a new situation that's going to last, it's incredible how people start getting faster, reacting faster, and as I say, finding new ways to collaborate and to keep serving people and creating value. This is what we see in the market.
And I'm sure we're going to see more of that. As you said, it's that speed of change. I think perhaps
Absolutely.
In the beginning, people were scratching their head a bit going, what are we going to do? But actually, Mohammed, if I could bring you in here, and there's nothing new, I suppose, when we talk about digital and digitalization here. We've been talking about this for quite a while now. Take me back a few years in terms of your career, you know, as a serial tech entrepreneur. Some people were ready for this. Some people were not ready for it. You know, as Eduardo says, people are playing catch up, but they're getting there. So we're never too late. But talk to me a little bit about what has been happening in this space that perhaps a lot of people were not aware of, and who are the winners right now, do you think?
I think there's a couple of things that you need to look at. One of them is the mindset of people. And when I look back 10 years ago, when I first created a startup here, it was Sukkar.com. It was a classic e-commerce fashion business. It was cash on delivery based, 85%, 90% cash on delivery, return rates in excess of 25%. Everyone told me you can't push credit cards in this market. It's impossible. I created an experiment for 2 weeks. I switched off cash on delivery and I forced people to use credit card, but at the same time, I gave them 20% discount on items from big brands, right? You know, all these brands, everyone wants them. 20% discount, no cash on delivery. Guess what? Our sales skyrocketed, right? So it's not about people don't want it. It's about what is the value that you give them in return for something. I think that's number one. So people are willing to experiment. People are willing to do stuff. And I go back to Steve Jobs' old statement, which is, you know, the people will not tell you what they need. You need to create what they need. And I think this is a super important topic. What has created needs now is a situation which is a global pandemic. And it required certain reaction, and human beings react and adapt to situations they face. I think this is super important. I recall when we launched Tradeling, and we were very unfortunate to launch at Gulfood, because, you know, we decided as a B2B marketplace, we wanted to launch food and beverage as the first big industry. So we launched it at Gulfood. At Gulfood, 16th of February, I realized, oh, there's no Chinese companies, right? And a month later, when we wanted to start our marketing efforts, food and beverage outlets shut down completely. Right? During Gulfood, I had a conversation with a very senior guy from a distributor of food and beverages here in the region. He came to our side and said, you know, what you are building, we are building ourselves. We don't need you. You don't have a clue of the market. I've been here for 30 years and we will crush you out of the market. That's literally his words, word by word. I think 3 or 4 weeks ago, he called me and he is asking me to help him onboard his products on our platform. Why am I saying this? It's anecdotal, maybe funny, but at the end of the day, this is a mindset shift, right? All these large companies that I used to serve as a consultant when I was with McKinsey were against any kind of change, no matter how good or bad the change is. But usually they say change is not good because I have my chair here. I'm sitting here for the last 20 years. I'm going to outlast you no matter what. Now, what happened is they can't outlast anyone unless they adapt very, very quickly. So that's the second thing. There's a mindset shift again. And the third thing is, what is happening now is the bad eggs in the basket are being filtered out, right? What do I mean by that? There's companies that have reacted in a really, really ugly manner when it came to laying off people, right? There's companies that don't have a good, especially in the startup scene, there are companies without a proper business model that cannot be resilient enough to survive a crisis like that, right? And their investors are realizing now, wow, we're investing in the wrong team, right? So the teams are so one thing is the founders team. The second thing is the execution and the business model. And the third thing is the quality of investors. Me as a startup, for example, now I'm funded by DAFZA, which is a Dubai government entity. They could have switched off everything. There's enough crisis in this country. They did not switch us off. They trusted that this is a long-term strategic impact to the market, and they continued funding, for which I'm very grateful. But at the end of the day, 90% of people did not get continued funding, right? Despite the fact that everyone with funds is sitting on these funds, not deploying them. And I think this is the three things that at the end of the day have surfaced during this crisis.
And again, these are the things too that I think everybody has to look inward, look outward, re-examine, and maintain that resilience. Because I think the one thing we do know, and I know everybody would wish somebody had put a time on it, you know, this will end. But let me move on and bring Hesham into this conversation here. And, you know, Mohammed, well done for having that funding in place, that it's staying with you in that. Mm-hmm. When we look at Jumia Egypt, and indeed we look at the market and we look back on the work that you've been doing, again, over your career too, it moves very differently in different markets. Some markets are way ahead. Some markets, you know, are still playing catch up. But one thing for sure, I think, you know, COVID-19 and the situation here has, in a way, brought everybody into the market. I don't think there's anybody in the world now that they might not understand its digitalization, but it is impacting everybody, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Like, I think what happened in the past 3 months, or maybe 3 months and a half, is the work of maybe 3 to 4 years of digital transformation. Yet the digital transformation was already happening in the past years, but it was heavily dependent on what we call usually the early adapters. So, which are usually the younger generations that are raised in the digital, the new digital world. But the penetration was usually lower at the higher age brackets. What we have seen in the past period that actually people and different age brackets are now adapting more to the digital platforms and not just using it once or twice a month. They are actually using it even on a daily basis. So this adoption that has increased significantly in the past period We're seeing it in different age brackets and demographics. And this is basically what we're seeing right now.
Mohammed, actually, if I might bring you back in here on this too, I see you tentatively listening there, but where can the funding come from? Where can we actually move this? And we look at smaller operations that are going in place, probably funding right now. I know a lot of people in the sector that are worried, they're concerned, and the danger is if they cannot, survive through another month or two right now, there's a danger they're going to go out of business. But how do we actually convince people to, I suppose, stay with it? And, where are you seeing the good funding coming from, Mohammed?
Look, I think, again, this needs a very differentiated view. In my personal opinion, and it sounds very harsh, but I don't mean it in a harsh way. I think this cleansing that is happening now is super important. A lot of things have been funded in the last 3 years that don't deserve funding under no global standard. When you see, for example, government programs that are doubling investments in Saudi Arabia, for example, 90% of this money is being deployed to people that don't have it in them to be an entrepreneur, a digital entrepreneur. They still lack the experience. They lack not only the experience, they lack sometimes basic professionalism to create something, but they have the funding. Now, what this results in is that 2 years, 3 years down the line, there will be statistics. No one knows where the money came from. No one knows the founders, but at the end of the day, there will be statistics. 100 million has been deployed, 99 have been lost. This statistics is read by the international big investors, and they say, okay, this market doesn't work. Right? And this is, I think, something that will be cleaned up a little bit. There will be a lot of stronger due diligence when investors look at startups. There is still funding happening. When you look at Tabby announcing yesterday or the day before yesterday that they raised funding, the reason for that is very simple. A, they have a world-class business model, they have a world-class market potential, and they have a world-class founder, right? And I think this is what deserves being funded, and they get funding. Nothing has to change. There is enough cash still in the market, especially with family offices, some institutional investors here, but not enough VC investors. Structured VC money is still very little here and very low, not enough high quality VC money. But I think the catastrophe of the pandemic for this region is that it will push back potential international VC investors for a couple of years until the resilience is created in this industry. I think what it shows now is that there is no resilience in the startup industry here, very little resilience, and it will need to rebuild, and this will take 1 to 2 years before the interest post, I would say, Careem deal, before this interest comes back to the market. And it's going to come back in a stronger way.
Yeah, in one sense, yeah, it's a real shame. But at the other time, as you say, it gives people time to come up with hopefully quality. Because ultimately that's what everybody's looking for.
And it will benefit the quality startups as well. So the quality startups that have market potential, the big marketplaces, for example, like Jumia, when the market matures a little bit more, and the digitization, probably, Hisham, correct me if I'm wrong, but this thing has helped you so much in your specific market, they will get funding and they will get continued funding over time.
Hisham, come in on that. How has that helped you? How has it been for you in the last few months, particularly?
I mean, like I was saying, and I agree with Mohammed on this. I mean, definitely we had a very strong boost in the past period. Like I said, it's the work of a couple of years, what we have seen in the past period. So, but what was really interesting is that the base that you're building our business model, on, which is the market, this marketplace model that we operate on. And we have seen quite interesting changes in that, where the adoption also on the supply side is actually increasing a lot. We have seen shifts from brands, big brands that are now, I mean, we've been in talks for quite several years actually with them, and now we see them moving faster toward joining platforms like Jumia to list their products on our website or other websites, and they are taking now the digital channel as a core channel for them, as a core sales channel for them, not a secondary channel that I mean, were not taken seriously at the beginning.
So it is. I mean, things escalating in that. Eduardo, let me come back to you. And when we look at digitalization, are we running on two parallel paths, so to speak? Is there one for the big corporates, and is there another rule and another sort of rollout for the entrepreneurs, or will IBM look at both with the same interest?
But by what I hear from our colleagues here, I think it's totally valid what we're seeing in the global corporate world. In fact, we have a global point of view about digitalization and where are the 7 key areas that will be the focus for the winner companies in the future, but also the focus of opportunities. And I think those key areas are totally valid, not only in the region, because they're totally valid here, but also for all kinds of businesses. We see the first big focus area on empowering remote workforces. We think this is a critical area that becomes a live or die after the pandemic. Companies understood that having a remote workforce is not only being able for the people to connect, so they need to be able to communicate, but they need to be actually effectively collaborating between each other. So that's the challenge, and we see a big area of focus and opportunity there on how you're going to adapt your tools, even your policies, your processes to allow people to work and to be even more effective than they were before now in this reality when actually 99% of your workforce is remote. So this is one axis that is totally valid and it's key. Another one has to do what Hisham was talking just now, is engage your customers virtually. I mean, all the companies that succeed and that will be leading in the future are those that are capable to engage to their customers virtually in any platform they want at any time they want. So that's another key area of opportunity. And of course, remote access to everything. This is the three most important digital trend that we see. It's not only about products and services. Of course, it's key to be able to provide and to access to product and services, but you need to access to training. You need to access to talent. There are huge opportunities today. I remember before in the projects that we needed to have with people in the room, in workshops, you're confined to the people you have in the room. So you needed one expert and you needed to have it with you. Today, in any kind of engagement, you can have an expert. If you're doing virtually, in a way you're collaborating, you can have the best expert that it's in Denmark or the best expert that you find in China or in South Africa for any kind of topic working with you. So we think that access remote to everything is another axis that is totally valid for businesses. And the other ones, of course, has to do with agility and efficiency, how to what we call in IBM implement intelligent workflows. So not try to find technology to help people to do something, try to find technology that does something and allow people to do something that adds more value. Protect for cybersecurity risk. Of course, there's a huge area of work and opportunities today more than ever about cybersecurity. Ensure continuity of supply chain. All the supply chains are in extreme pressure today, and every company, every entrepreneur that is working in supply chain, it has a lot of work and opportunity. And at the end, we believe that there are two areas that came to highlight to the first place, and those are health and government services. That may be not the things you discuss and you have on the top of the news before the pandemic, but today health and government services are going to be in top of the agendas of every company.
Absolutely. I mean, they're huge. And you've almost outlined our entire series there for me. So thank you for doing that as well, because just about everything Eduardo has talked about is in the next few weeks throughout the summer, we're going to be covering all of that. Mohammed, I want to come back to you. And you talked about people coming onto your platform now that perhaps at the time were not. And I mean, we're all in this situation. I'm probably a bit late coming on board myself, but we're thinking, yeah, we'll get there. We do know we have to do it. But now that big drive, because it maybe was a desire that people might do it, but now I don't think there's a choice. And would you say there's no turning back? I mean, right now, do you expect that everything that has gone on digital platforms and that will stay there, probably will increase, and more people should come on? But I don't think there's a turning back on this one. What do you think?
I do believe that in general, human beings are habit animals. That's one thing. And the second thing, they're herd animals. So there's these two components. First of all, the entire herd moved towards digital right now. And part of this herd will remember what they have done before the pandemic lockdown, right? So what will happen, let's say, is today we have 100% credit card rate on deliveries, nearly 100%. It maybe go back to 80%, 70%. But, in terms of e-commerce, you always say the first hurdle to convert is the toughest hurdle, right? The likelihood of conversion to the second and third and fourth transaction is always higher than the first transaction, right? Once you've taken this step and you cross the red line, you usually enjoy it and you continue doing it. And I think this is how I would describe the answer to your question. People who have never tried it before will try it again. And then there's other components. Obviously, when I talk in business language, you have the risk assessment, right? You will see a risk of this happening again, and you want to be prepared, right? This doesn't mean that you will give up the entire old way of doing. Otherwise, we would never be in a restaurant again, right? We'll only have food delivery home from centralized kitchens that are hygienic with webcams, survive, blah, blah, blah. It's not going to happen. People want to sit outside. People want to engage. People will do things they have done before. And that's what I mean by habit animals. But in terms of business, there's now two extremes, right? One extreme is saying, and when you follow it online in the blogosphere, you will see, yeah, work from home. Everyone should work from home. Bollocks, right? I don't think anybody should work from home forever. I think you need to assess where it makes sense to sense a person in a room next to you, and you bond on a personal level, and you get things done because someone likes you, likes your presence, and does you a favor because they want to work with you. And sometimes you can transmit this and convey this message over Zoom or over Teams or any other means, but sitting in a room with a bunch of people is always helpful, period. I think this cannot be replaced in the long run. You cannot replace a doctor with virtual doctors. Yeah. But part of the job, which is the top of the funnel of preparing things, maybe can become more efficient. I think people will stop their stupid control mentality that existed in the past. If you don't show up at 8 at work and you leave at 8 p.m., then you did not work. Today, people have no choice. They need to trust that I'm
talking about that. CEOs are talking about it because I think they've been forced at home as well, so they can see it works, which is really exciting, particularly for the new method of working.
Exactly.
Let me just stay with us here, of course. I mean, and one thing I'm missing is not doing a panel with all of you. I mean, it's lovely to do Zoom and that, but I do miss the little eye contact and the quick sort of thing where I can bring you in and out. But we're doing pretty good on this. Hesham, talk to me though, particularly about the market too in Africa. The market here in Dubai is, running, at a top speed in many ways too. But we look around Africa, Hesham, and, there are many other areas where, there are issues. And we also have to look at, the global economic climate as well for the years ahead. I mean, the R word is out there. We are in a recession. So this is also, it's going to really impact a lot of people who don't have that disposable income. How do you see things actually hopefully improving, or how do you think digitalization will be rolled out in Africa, again, for the benefit of all the people?
Well, definitely it starts first with the infrastructure itself that is used for the digital transformation. And in Africa, I mean, different countries have had their own strategies to build, to build their own digital transformation plan. And in the recent, definitely after the COVID-19, we have seen some countries actually investing more in improving their internet services in the countries, because this is the core of the business itself. We have seen also some governments uniting with the digital platforms to actually serve some key topics and challenges, economical challenges that faces those governments. We have seen that, for example, to support the local SMEs, for example, because they were the mostly affected companies in this crisis, and also when it comes to financial inclusion. I mean, all of those challenges that faces the governments, the local governments, they are now currently uniting with digital platform companies to actually serve and support them in those challenges or those battles.
Eduardo, whose job is digitalization? Whose responsibility is it? Whose role is it? Is it the private sector? Is it the government? And I want to bring Mohammed in on this one too. I mean, because, but Eduardo, give me a feel for.
I would say that in this region, we have this particularity, especially in the Gulf, that I would say in many aspects of digitalization, governments have the lead, and they definitely push the rest of the companies in the private sector. But there are great examples in both cases. But I would say in this region, in the Gulf especially, is something very particular that takes the attention of people when they come here and they see the level of digitalization we have in public services. It's top of the range.
Mohammed, what do you think?
I think the government specifically here in the GCC specifically, is playing a good role at role modeling how it could work. It's basically order the mufti, and then everything is digitized in a government entity, period. Like there's absolutely no discussions. What's lacking sometimes is long-term strategy, but this comes with experience usually, right? You know, you get new technology, a consultant sells it to you, you take it, you implement it, then you figure out it was the wrong technology, right? And then you do something else.
That's expensive too, so people get
something where that turns off people after a while, but you know, they're learning. That's one. The second thing is you have the large corporates here. The large corporates here, to be honest, and there's the banking sector, there's different sectors. They're very resistant to change. And when they change, they try to change from the inside, right? So they take an IT project manager and they make him chief digital officer, or make her chief digital officer, transformation officer, whatever you can call it, digital disruption person, whatever it is. And all of this, and I haven't seen one case in the last 20 years where this change from inside really worked. Not a single change. The only thing I've seen is, Eduardo doesn't like to hear it, but there's a lot of revenue streams going to consultants all the time. And there's 20 to 200, 400, 500 consultants in these places. And the value is really limited for the customer. Now, I ask myself, why don't I have a digital bank account in this country? It's unbelievable. It's really, it's mind-blowing. Whenever I call a bank, they say, come to the what do you call it? Come to the branch.
The branch, yeah.
Knowing that I can do my visa, my residency entirely online, not touching any place apart from the medical check. This is crazy, right? So that's this. The third thing is, and the answer to your question ultimately is, you can only do a digital transformation of a country if you have a flourishing startup and tech scene. I think this is where innovation comes from. Innovation doesn't come from, let's say, a group of 2,000 people or 3,000 people that has been doing the effort in the same way for the last 30 years, right? I think this doesn't work. You need to change these people and basically contribute by adding people that have not done it the same way for 30 years. You need to have probably 25% fresh blood in an organization in order for an organization to change over time. And no one here is willing to lay off people unless like a corona hits you, right? And I think this is one of the big challenges. What you need to do is you need to have startups show you how it works, innovate from outside, then adopt this innovation to the large entities maybe, or create a business line that is outside the existing political environment that you're usually in a corporate, and then try to do the transformation from outside and basically take over the old fashioned way of doing business.
But indeed, Mohammed, and again, I think on that point of what you're talking about, Eduardo, I want to bring you in on this. It also comes about, I think, with strategic leadership and strategic cooperation within a company. And I think what you're saying to Mohammed is a lot of people are sitting on the chair and they're not going to move off it. And that's happening around the world. It's not just happening in this region. I think that resistance to change. How do you get corporations, and is it, Eduardo, the only way you're going to do it is get the ownership, get the leadership in place, and once that comes from the CEO, from the board, from the key people, then, and also I guess it's about empowering all of your people. If you can't do that, and if you can't get buy-in from everybody, you know, it's hardly going to be successful, is it?
Yeah, I think there is a change on mindset. What we see in the companies that are really leaders in their sectors is the ones that put customer experience in the middle, that understand that the customer experience you provide and how the customers see your services is not just how you provide them, it's all the options that the customers have today. How every time we receive a service digitally, we not compare our service with the bank. So we not say, oh, this bank doesn't have a very good service. Probably this is a better service in another bank, I mean, digitally. What the customers are saying are comparing you with the best experience they have everywhere. So what customers do is, oh no, this bank doesn't have a good experience, is saying, oh no, this bank should have the same experience I have with my Uber account or I have with my Apple products. This is the experience that you're being compared now. So companies are realizing that the banks doesn't need to beat the banks. The utility doesn't need to beat another utility company. A telco doesn't need to compare with another telco. They need to compare to the best experience customers are having today. And this experience, as Muhammad was saying, may come from everywhere and many times come from very agile entrepreneurs and startups. So really the mindset and to put this idea of the customer experience in the center is what really start transforming the companies as we see it.
We have some questions coming in here, so let me just get to a few of the questions. And indeed, if you want to carry on any comment on that, I'll take it at the minute. But I do see everybody at home, they're really eager to put some questions to you all. And I have one for Hisham first. And this is from Ahmed Mohammed from Egypt. According to Hisham, how do you see the digital financial transactions in Egypt before, now, and post-COVID? How are things going to change in terms of digital financial transactions? What do you think, Hisham?
No, definitely we've seen a very positive impact in the past period. I think the digital payments in general, the challenge in it, and maybe we can link that to the discussion about the government role in the digital transformation, because one of the key challenges of the digital payments, for example, are the proper, is actually to incentivize more people to have bank accounts. I mean, is the problem in the penetration of digital payment is not just that people are not using those digital services, but you have lack of, for example, if we're talking about credit cards, you have lack of bank accounts in countries like Egypt, and number of bank accounts in countries like Egypt and other African countries. So this can only be led by the government themselves. So yes, we have seen some positive progression in the digital payment topic, but it's not definitely as the overall adoption rate that has been increasing for the digital transformation in general. So, and again, because most of the blockers are again related to regulations and incentives that should be done by the government to put more incentives towards those type of payments.
I have a question here for Mohammed, and this comes from Turkey. Ahmed Umed asks, what's your opinion on the e-commerce future, particularly as e-commerce will shorten the supply chain and people want to change their traditional way of dealing with customers?
I think what will happen is there will be a couple of mega trends. One of the mega trends is AR. I think this is one of the mega trends. The experience of looking at products will be very localized and contextualized and digitized as well. That's number one. I think number two is there is a mega trend, which is personalization and tailorization. So you will be able to define how your car looks like within pulling things together on your VR and AR, probably AR glasses, and you will say, okay, this is the car that I want, this is the component I want. You will configure it and will automatically be produced. I think 3D printing will change everything that we experience now when it comes to, you know, the standard goods that you use, from cutlery to fashion even.
And I think the next just in time rather than having a huge supply
and just in time. I think it will change the entire storage system and warehousing system and supply chain system. And I think the final thing that will change everything again. So you have 3D printing as a massive thing, AR is a massive thing, and 5G will change everything, because whatever you do will have a brain all of a sudden. Whatever you have surrounding you has a brain, has tracking capabilities, has fraud capabilities, has George Orwell capabilities. There's so many things that will change the way we live that will come in the next 5 years. Like when I talk to automotive managers in Germany, for example, and I talk about, you know, self-driving cars, and, you know, I'm so sad that my children in 25 years will not be able to drive a car. They say, why do you say 25? This is more 5 to 10, right? And I'm like, wow, which means like my 6-year-old will not be able to drive by himself in certain cities in 5 years from now. Right?
And you'll be telling him great stories and telling the grandchildren.
I will tell him, hey man, it's so much fun to press the gas pedal and to drive, right?
And rum, yes.
Over. So a lot of things will change, especially in e-commerce.
Yeah. Actually, a question here too for Eduardo, if I can, from Turkey also. We have a big audience in Turkey right now. Gulkan from Babuk from Turkey here. Which sectors have been affected the most by COVID? And what do you think about various digital platforms? Eduardo.
Well, it's a tough question. I think, of course, travel and transportation, tourism, entertainment, it's been really, really affected. I think that's very visible. There are some digital platforms and alternatives. In my personal experience, I don't know of very, very big examples of a huge transformation that has changed any of these sectors. I still see that it will be hard time for travel and transportation and tourism for the time being. It's a matter of just seeing airlines, and so it's a difficult time for them. Yeah.
And I think we see that again around the world. It's not just in this region. Or Hesham here from Mohammed Samir from Egypt comes into and says, how do you see the future of digital transformation now and post-COVID, particularly when we look at, East Africa as well? Mohammed Samir sent that one in for Hesham.
So I think I will go back to the point that Mohammed has mentioned regarding the convergence, the improvements in the convergence that is happening right now, because people knew about the digital platforms that existed in the market, but they were not using them. Now we see better convergence. And the continuity of this is basically related to the customer experience that people will experience using those digital platforms. Is it a good service or is it a bad service? And again, this is a big, definitely priority for all the digital companies to make sure that the service that they are currently providing are actually up to the expectations, especially for those who are now converting to the digital, services right now.
We have quite a few questions coming in here still, and I know all of you are looking at, Europe, Middle East, and Africa. So I'm going to throw this one to Mohammed, and it comes from Hamza in Morocco. What do you think about the future of the digital transformation, particularly in African government entities, after the current situation here? Government really has to take this on board. I think they're being pushed into this. So when we look on a wider series, you've seen some good support here in the Middle East in terms of Dubai from government. Can you comment on what hopefully African government entities might do?
Look, I'm no expert in really of the African continent. Probably Hisham has a better perspective there. But I think one thing that all countries have in common is probably two or three things. Number one is you need to create the infrastructure of enabling internet in a much better way. So you need to have fast speed, lightning speed internet, 5G enablement in rural areas as well as in urban areas. I think this is the enabler to wealth. And I think what COVID has, what in general, the last 4 or 5 years have shown us is people see what's happening around the globe through social media and through visibility of everything. So no one accepts to being less wealthy than someone else of the same age anywhere on the planet anymore, right? So there is a really push towards governments to enable infrastructure that enables interacting on the internet. I think that's one. Number two is if you want to enable technology leadership and technology productivity, you need to enable education in these fields. And I think that's the second thing. And it comes with availability of access, and access is digital access. I think you will see a lot of edtech companies that bring education to rural areas in Africa. This is one of the things that governments will focus on. And they have seen now through this work from home pandemic global situation that this is possible, right? It's not the best case scenario, but at least it brings levels of education. And you need to educate people in technology, because this is the enabler then for governments to transform, right? If you don't have anyone inside your country who can take who can take the charge of e-visa, for example, or take any possession, ownership of really critical government bodies, e-health, all these things require nationals to do it because there's loyalty with the country involved. I think this needs education of the country. So create the infrastructure, create education technology, and then do the transformation. And probably these are parallel work streams that you need to work on. And honestly, I firmly believe, and this is something where I believe actually in consulting firms. I think this needs to be driven by consulting firms, right? I think the McKinseys of this world and the IBMs in the technical implementation field, at least, they need to help these countries augment the way they're operating today and give them an operating model, because the guys leading these countries have no clue. They need an operating model on how can they transform the country.
And I think actually it is the type of thing, and a perfect segue back to you, Eduardo, that a lot of the, the IBMs and the big players, the Microsofts, all of the big names in the world are actually doing. They know they have to do it. But coming back to, I think, a dual question for you here, Eduardo, in the fact of being sort of a big enabler in this, but also the need for education and the need for education to get people up to speed. But I also, back to your point too, Mohammed, the dynamic social change that is coming about, I think, because of digitalization and that almost democratization of information, and the fact that, Mohammed in New York is, doing as good, well, he's probably doing better than Mohammed in Egypt, but, in rural Egypt. but Mohammed in rural Egypt knows that he's not going to stay there for the rest of his life, perhaps, and he knows he will have a better life than his grandparents, and all of this is there. So, Eduardo, what can be done, particularly in that rush and that, I think, urgency for better education? Because the younger population, they're digital natives, even though they might have a cheap phone, a small one, they know how to work it, and they see a very different life out there. What can we do?
What I see, the big corporations, and there are huge initiatives in order to democratize access of technology, take it to where people actually need it. I see all the big companies in the world having tighter engagements with academics, with media, and of course, it's not only about applications in commercial industries, products, services. There's huge use of data, for example, in emerging markets like Africa, for the weather data, for example, to improve the productivity of the crops, to work with cooperatives across the continent in order to use the data to have better access to financing, platforms that provide them better information. So technology, I would say, with this level of digitalization, will be embedded in every activity that we do today, public or private.
Yes,
there's nothing that will be left out.
In Africa, I mean, we've come across some wonderful startups, particularly in the food supply and the agricultural side, that are doing great things. Exactly, just sending messages to the farmers, and again, you know, being able to send voice messages and stuff. They know what's happening with the crops. They can check the weather. They can do all that. So tremendous initiatives going on here. Back to you, Hesham. Looking at education, and again, we look around Africa particularly, and I think education has to go hand in hand with poverty eradication, with, you know, energy poverty eradication. I've talked to many ministers in the energy space, and they're telling me that they hope that 60% of their country will have access to energy in, you know, 20 years time. But what do we do with the other 40%? So the dynamics, particularly in Africa, and particularly in the rural areas, and when it comes to education and access to education and access to basic power, this must be a huge challenge for people. What do you think?
Definitely, but I just wanted to comment one last point on the government part, because I think there is a mutual liability between tech companies and the governments to actually, first, on the tech companies, to give more visibility to the governments on how they operate and the amount of investments, for example, that they are investing to build the sector. I think, I mean, when we talk to the government, there is a lack of visibility on the operating model, the business model on those tech startups, how they operate and how they manage their investments. And also on the government side, like we discussed, I mean, to put the right level or the right regulations to actually support the growth of those companies. If those regulations are not there, any tech company or any tech startup will face a lot of challenges to grow and you know, to grow in the market. So that's on the government part. On the education, I will discuss it more from an employer standpoint, because I mean, in Africa, I mean, when we started like 80 years ago, it was very difficult, definitely, to find the right calibers that can join our platform on our company, and definitely we had to use external experiences or experiences coming from different other regions to actually help in building the company. But actually, by time we started seeing quite good, interesting calibers that had the skills that we can actually use to, how they can be joining our platform and help building this platform. So, and the skills are mostly linked to the level of education, or the education, which is highly concentrated in certain areas in the world, not definitely in this area, not in Africa. So I think there should be some kind of a cooperation between the tech companies and the government to actually support in creating dual system learning, for example, that where students can learn within a digital company and at the same time, or an enterprise beside their school-based learning. The curriculums also needs to be defined in collaboration with digital companies. The teacher quality also can also be supported by ex-digital sector employees or even current ones. such kind of cooperation between the government and digital companies can help in improving or putting the right level of education that tech companies usually are looking for.
Absolutely. And Mohammed, I think this is something close to your heart as well. Are you finding, as you expand, are you finding a labor force out there that are, ready to go? Are they qualified? Are they, yes, you have digital natives, but are we learning in yesterday's classrooms, getting ready for tomorrow's workforce? What do we need to do when it comes to education, and how can the tech companies and everybody begin to work closer with the education? Because there is a bit of a mismatch there sometimes, and we hear this from every industry.
The question for me is now, are you talking about the MENA region, or are you talking about a global?
Well, I suppose global, but how do you find it? Because you need to hire.
Now, for me here in MENA, I need to differentiate again for MENA, right? Give me one university in MENA that is ranked in the Financial Times. Just one. Economist, just one. One university that produced top-notch talents, top-notch research, etc. pp. Okay, now this has nothing to do with digitization, but it has to do with ambition. It has to do with the mindset of people that are released from university and educational system. I think as an entrepreneur with a tech company, and again, I'm Western educated, but I have a very Arabic heart, and I'm here because I want to progress this region. That's really my purpose at the end of the day. I'm willing to hire 100 interns and train them, and I'm willing to pay for them. But then when I have to, look for the residency applications, for the housing, for all these things, it puts so many hurdles that it just doesn't. I'm willing to invest. Don't misunderstand me. I'm willing to invest a couple of $1,000s per person just to train them so that they can become a benefit to the ecosystem in 2 or 3 years. But there's too many hurdles in each country. This is regardless of the country you look at in the Middle East. It's just too difficult. Now, the successful players in the startup scene in Europe, for example, let me take Europe because I'm very familiar with this. They come either from my university, which is where the founder of Rocket Internet and I graduated together. And this basically create entrepreneurship through the activities of what he has done and selling to eBay and all this. I created a buzz. 50% of successful startups in Europe come from this space. The guys behind Jumia, basically, right? From this crowd. And the other crowd comes from either BCG or McKinsey. And then there's the rest of the 20%. So there's 40% here, 40% there, and the rest 20%. Why am I saying that? I'm saying that because, there's the university that I was at, for example, there's a few like that throughout Europe. They're very, very close to the corporate world. And they're very, very close to the government. So practical understanding and application of what you learn in theory is probably the number one priority next to social competence. Be socially competent and apply what you learn immediately while you are studying. I think this application part is missing entirely in this part of the world. The concept of internships doesn't exist here pretty much, right? For me, before graduating, I had to do 4 internships, one of them international, and each one of them minimum 3 months. My thesis had to be written in a company, etc. pp. So this gives you exposure to decision-making. It gives you exposure to hands-on customer centricity when you work in entities that actually focus you on that as a young student. This really shapes you and tells you, look, if you work with an entrepreneur directly, you want to be an entrepreneur in the future. You think the way an entrepreneur thinks. And I think this is something that, and that's going back to the older question, I think this is the number one thing governments need to do when they talk about educational structuring and restructuring in edtech. How do you make sure that people who learn apply what they have learned at Jumia and other companies like that, right? I think this is essential because only then you augment the overall level of the society and make them ready for digitization and entrepreneurship and tech innovation.
But I do think, the optimistic side of this is I think there's a desire to do that. I talk with many universities. I've actually been in some of the high schools here where I'm blown away with, the focus that the kids have and they put in, and I see it in the education system. And when we do our topic on education, I think we'll also see that. So the momentum it needs to be pushed along. It needs not to be pushed along. It needs a juggernaut to kind of speed it along. It better get on the highway soon. It's still on the low roads, I suppose. So it's the theory is there, but I think and it is happening in sort of niche areas, but this has to be, as you say, it has to be the norm. Eduardo, maybe come in on this one, because when, we think of a big company like IBM and the work that you can do within the education space and how education establishments obviously depend on companies like you as well, what can be done, do you think, to actually make sure that it you can almost impact and influence educational establishments. And when it comes to digital, of course, but I see this in every industry, and they're knocking on the doors of academia and saying we need more qualified people to be able to leave school and come to work, rather than leave school with great qualifications and then have to start learning again almost.
I think the most important thing, and it has to do with the topic of the conversation about digitalization. What we have learned and what we implement in every of our engagement, it's that digitalization and digital transformation is not a technology only project or engagement. You tend to, if you have not worked yet in digital projects, you tend to see, oh, it's going to be about bits and bytes and platforms, and really the reality is that's even in today's world, that's the least of the conversations. Today, a digital project, a digitalization engagement, I would say mostly is about people, about how people interact, how people work, how people adopt collaboratively new ways of working. And that's the way all the company transform. And at the end, digital is just a medium to provide a better experience to our customers. So this is something we see and we implement with every engagement that we have. This is not about discussing about technology first, it's discussing about people first. So I think that's the main view that we have in everything we do.
Hesham, we have a question here, and indeed I think it's something that, I'll roll it around to a few people. Looking specifically at Kenya for you, when we look at Africa, that we're seeing in Kenya, this came from Mark Kabemba from Kenya, looking at digital lending organizations closing down during this period, where SMEs actually need them more and need the support. How is it clear that digital organizations, what about the fear, the risk-taking and the fear? What do you look on this? Because if the financial institutions and lending organizations are not there to help, is there a danger where the risk becomes too much and it's the fear? Or do we go back to Mohammed and say, this is fine, the strong will survive in this, and the ones who shouldn't be doing it shouldn't be doing it? But Hesham, just if you'd address this for Mark in Kenya.
Well, I think definitely, let's be honest. There are a lot of companies that are suffering and will suffer because of the situation of the COVID-19. And it's not now, it's also in the coming future, near future. So the impact is not what we're witnessing right now. The impact is what we will witness maybe after the COVID-19 situation ends. So, and I think there should be some clear cooperations, again, between the governments and the big digital companies that exist in the countries they have, and make sure that they collaborate together to support those companies and provide them with the necessary. It's not just opening a digital platform. It's also related to how those digital platform operates. It requires a lot of education, training, tools that needs to be there. So it's not just a decision of a company to digitalize. No, there are a lot of things that needs to be done, and that would require definitely collaboration between the government and the private sector.
Mohammed, talk to me a bit about that fear right now, particularly, with the lending institutions too. Are people right to be fearful? Is this the time to be investing, or would you say that this is a great opportunity?
I think in general, if you're an investor sitting on a lot of money, now is the time to invest, right? And I go with Soros and Buffett and all these guys. The right time to invest is really in a crisis, right? Because you need to be anti-cyclical with all these guys that exit their positions and lower the price for you. Just go in and buy, right? And the most successful investors have done exactly that. If you look at all their biographies, that's one. But what we're talking about is not the investor. What we're talking about is lending institutions, right? And banks, frankly, they have a social responsibility, and they're not assuming this responsibility nowhere on the planet. And I think this is something where I think I'm very, very, very reluctant to say the regulator needs to step in or the government needs to step in and regulate a market. But I think when it comes to bank, I would be ruthless. I would be really ruthless if I was the government. I would say, look, I have a bucket of money that I'm putting for the market. If you don't deploy it to your clients with no time to activate the economy is suffering, and you're the only one making money. You're sitting on a ton of money that you pulled out from the market, actually. So you're drowning the market rather than really helping everyone to survive. And you're getting means from the central bank and from the government they have no right to exist. I would be ruthless. I would dismantle these banks, literally.
Because yes, I mean, we need to keep it is when the economy is stalled, and it's been forced stalled at the moment. Anybody who has a responsibility and who can do something should actually be out there doing it. We only have about 5 minutes left, and I have two quick questions here. So perhaps Eduardo, and in fact, any of you can come in on this. When we look at supply chain, the future of supply chain here, and I know, Mohammed, you talked about it earlier. I'll stay with you for the minute on that. How different is it going to be in the region? Is it really going to change?
If you're asking me, let me answer quickly. I think one massive thing that will come out as a change based on COVID is people have realized right now how dependent they are on China, right? And I think this is a massive, massive shift. It's what I call a tectonic shift in world politics, right? The US has realized probably 5 to 10 years ago that they're too depending on China, and Trump is fighting that, actually. The Trump administration, not Trump, he's just a figurehead there. The second thing is Europe has realized that China is too powerful when it comes to supply chain. I think Europe is a little bit more differentiated when it comes to politics here. But if everything in world production relies on China and China shuts the doors, the world will drown. And I think this is what will come out of this pandemic. So people will build centers of excellence for production around the globe. In low-cost countries such as India more. I think Africa will experience a boom in this. I think South America will experience a boom. And I think certain things will be produced closer to the country, no matter what cost. If you look at Germany, for example, and excuse me that I give examples of Germany, but that's the market I know best. Masks are being produced despite the fact that they're 3 or 4 times the cost that they cost in China. They're produced locally now. Gloves are produced locally. Why? Because this is something that is a systemic essential. That's what they call it, and it needs to be there if really things shut down, right? And I think this is something that people realize. If the automotive industry breaks down because China shut down, where do we get there, right? This can't happen, and this can't happen ever again for the world. And I think this is something that will change.
And I think that's a lovely closing thought from you. I have to take that one on it as I move on, to Hisham and Eduardo, just to give us that closing wrap. And I think we'll keep it in the supply chain because it really is probably one of the vital areas. Hisham, where do you see, particularly for Africa as well, and that Eastern Africa bloc too, for Egypt, the supply chain future? Just very quickly, because we're wrapping up. Thank you.
No, I think there would be more focus on the local manufacturing angle. I think local manufacturing. Yes, yeah, which is good. I mean, for all developing countries, and I mean, we have seen that in the past period that a lot of products, even if we did not have yet the expertise in manufacturing them, people try to find ways to manufacture them. So yes, it's a tough way to to get educated about or to adapt. But I mean, I think there will be a very strong focus on the local manufacturing part.
And again, I think that will actually generate, economic activity locally, which will be good and hopefully very good for rural areas and areas, that need business to serve perhaps the cities and that. Eduardo, I'm leaving you the last word on this, and I need a quick one. The future for the supply chain.
I think we're hearing more and more a word that it's a kind of a technology word, but it's going to be about blockchain. I'm positive that there will be a lot of improvements in transparency, traceability of goods, and improvement in trust in the supply chain. So I'm very positive that every day we will hear more and more this technology coming in.
Well, thank you all, and thank you so much, Eduardo, Mohammed, Hisham, and thank you all at home for sending in some of your questions there. Sorry we didn't get to them all, but we'll make sure that we perhaps get to them a little earlier the next time, but really nice engagement there from our audience, and I hope you've got some inspiration and engagement from our dear panelists here. It was great to have you all on board. It's a real delight to have your expertise and to have your opinions in terms of where you sit right now and where you see the future, because everybody is really looking at what we have to do and how we actually build resilience and how we thrive for the next few months till the end of the year, and indeed make sure that we put in place, some sustainability for even longer on that. This has, been Frontiers of Innovation, our very first program, really taking a wider look at what's going on in the digital world. We're going to be back every Wednesday throughout the summer. Canon has put in place some great speakers that we're going to engage with, and we're really going to look right across every industry, look at every sector, see what's going on, engage with some great minds and some great more speakers that we're going to have with us. Be back on Wednesday again. We're live at 5 here in Dubai, and again in Europe and areas a little bit earlier, obviously, too. So Wednesday, the 17th is our next one. We're going to be looking at safety, security, particularly at home and at work, which sometimes is the same these days. So from all of the team at Canon, and from myself, Etna Trainer, from Hisham Mohammed and Eduardo, we'll wish you farewell. So stay safe, stay strong, and indeed stay in touch. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.